Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Coming up in the third segment of today's show, we're going to talk about why the CDC is still keeping schools closed and your kids terrified. We'll tell you the true story why they're doing that. It's not because of the science. It's because the teachers union wants to use your kids as leverage so that they can bring in more government money for themselves, for the union. Is there a more corrupt group in the country than the teachers union? It is so, it's one of the hardest things to get through people's brains. I don't know why this is so difficult. The teachers union is not there, does not exist for the best interest of your kids. The teachers union exists for the best interests of the union. Sometimes that lines up with even the best interest of the teachers, but not even always. It almost never lines up with the best interest of your kids. And we now have evidence, we have proof that, not evidence, we have proof that they've colluded with the CDC. The teachers unions colluded with the CDC to keep schools closed. And now finally in some places, schools are open for the most part, but barely. Kids still have to mask up, still distanced, still behind plexiglass barriers. Many, at least in San Diego, the kids are still put in separate rooms with headphones, taking Zoom class while they're in the school building and their teachers in the next room over because we can't fit enough kids in one class. It's insane. We'll talk more about that coming up in a little segment, about two more segments, but I want to talk about COVID generally here. Everywhere I go, I live in San Diego, everywhere I go, people are still wearing masks outside, in their car, alone, walking down the sidewalk, alone. There's no other people, and they're wearing their masks. And I ask people why. I stop them. I say, why are you doing that? And they all say the same thing. They say, the CDC says. Like they're a robot. Oh, the CDC says. That's all it takes, sheep. The CDC says. The CDC has no skin in the game. CDC is made of a bunch of Democrat bureaucrats. So you got those people who are just like, totally brainwashed. And then you have another segment of the population that is so stuck in their cult. They believe, or they act like wearing a mask is how they prove to the world that they're not a Trump supporter. That's their projection to the world. Proof that I'm not a Neanderthal. I'm not a troglodyte. I'm not a backwards Trump voter. Brookline, Massachusetts. It's the second highest educated city in the country behind Bethesda, Maryland, outside the capital, right? This is Brookline, Massachusetts. That's on Boston, right? They voted to keep their outdoor mask mandate in place above what the CDC. So even the CDC came out and said, we don't need to wear them outside if you're vaccinated. And Brookline, Mass said, no. You must still wear it outside even if you're vaccinated. Why? To prove that they're not Florida. That's it. That's what that is. We are definitely not Trump supporters here. Let me prove to you how not Trump supporters we really are. No conservatives here. And we're going to prove that. And we're going to follow what? The science? There's no science there. No science there at all. It is nonstop fear and panic forever. Now the New York Times this morning, they ran an article that there may never be herd immunity. It'll never happen. We'll never, ever have herd immunity. Are you kidding me? Check this out. This is Michael Osterholm. He's an epidemiologist. He's University of Minnesota. He's on Biden's COVID council now. He's on everything. He's on every news network. They always go to this guy, right? Michael Osterholm. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast back in like January or February of last year. He was really one of the first people to ring the alarm bells about how terrible and awful COVID is going to be, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so this is him on Meet the Press a month ago. This was April 4th. Right? Some lines from him. We are in a Category 5 hurricane status. We're just at the beginning of this surge. The surge. We haven't even really begun to see it yet. He says, let me give you an example on an airplane flight. When you get vaccinated, it's like buying a fireproof suit that works 95% of the time. but it doesn't work all the time. So why would you want to walk into a big fire if you don't have to? What an idiot. That's not how that works at all. We've told this a million times. If a vaccine is 95% effective, that does not mean you have a 5% chance of getting COVID. You have a 0.04% chance of getting COVID, not a 5%. Like, how irresponsible for this guy who knows better to be talking like this. He says, Chuck, I'm even more worried about what's coming down the pike for the next several years. And then he talks about the B117 variant, and the fact is that it infects kids very readily. Okay, that was a month ago. No different than the CDC director saying, I'm so scared and I just have this feeling that our darkest days are ahead. Or we have a feeling of impending doom. That was a month ago. Have we had the impending doom yet here in America from these men and women of science? On February 13, that same guy, Michael Osterholm, he said America's darkest days with the virus are ahead of us. The darkest days. Here we are, what, 6, 7 weeks later? We've dropped and stayed at nearly nothing. In San Diego County, we have like 0 to 1 death a day from COVID. Is it from COVID, with COVID? It's like nothing. What are we doing? Let me give you a dose of science here. Okay, ready for a dose of science? This is from the CDC website. Okay, this is the CDC says, but they don't talk about this. Check this out. 87 million people vaccinated. All right. 7,157, they call them breakthrough infections. These are people who got the double vaccine and they still got infected. Now, infected doesn't mean sick. Note that. Infected doesn't mean sick. Sick doesn't mean hospitalized. Hospitalized doesn't mean dead. So when they talk about infected, that just means people who got it, not necessarily sick and not, of course, not even spread it. Okay, so 87 million people vaccinated. 7,000 people got a breakthrough infection. 498 were hospitalized. 88 died. Of people out of 87 million. What's the math on that? Vaccinated people have a 0.0005% chance of being hospitalized and a 0.0001% chance of dying from the coronavirus. Okay? That's from the CDC website, you worshipers of the CDC. Okay? So if you're in Brookline, Mass, and you're vaccinated and you're walking around outside with a mask on, you have no chance of getting it, right? And even if you get it, you have a 0.0001% chance of dying. You have a way better chance of a tree falling on you when you're walking around outside. And no one walks around like this all the time looking for trees falling on your head. You have a way higher chance of dying from the flu. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about scientists, okay? Whenever you hear scientists on the TV or the radio or wherever, you have to ask yourself, is this person trying to inform me or persuade me? Are they informing or persuading? Watch out for the scientists who are persuading. There's a famous physicist, Richard Feynman, and he has a super famous quote. You've maybe heard it before. He says, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. That's one of his famous quotes. That quote is from a commencement address that he gave at Caltech in 1974. And he has a whole, you should definitely read it. It's awesome. The whole thing's great. But he has this great line about the state of science today. And he's talking to these future scientists, right? This is Caltech, 1974, Richard Feynman. He says, if you're doing an experiment, you should report everything that you think might make it invalid, not only what you think is right about it. Details that could throw doubt on your interpretation must be given. You must do the best you can if you know anything at all wrong or possibly wrong to explain it. If you make a theory and advertise it or put it out there, then you also must put down all the facts that disagree with it, as well as those that agree with it. If you've made up your mind to test a theory, you should always decide to publish it whichever way it came out. If we only publish results of a certain kind, we can make the argument look good, but we must publish both kinds of results, right? So here he is just talking about being honest, transparent, open with your information in an effort to inform people. Hey, we did this study. Here's what I thought was going to happen. Oh, gosh, golly, why don't you know what the opposite happened? Well, here it is anyway. Or, hey, I did this study. Here's what happened, but we couldn't test for this, we couldn't account for this, we couldn't pinpoint this variable. It could be these things that actually did it. I think it's this thing that led us to these results, but it could be these other things too. And here's all the reasons why this experiment's bunk and really shouldn't be taken with much of anything anyway. You decide. That's a scientist. That's informing. What we have now are just people persuading. Here's the kicker line. He says, the idea is to try and give all the information to help others to judge the value of your contribution, not just the information that leads to judgment in one particular direction or another. Scientists have been doing it, many scientists that we see on TV have been doing a terrible job of this. They say, oh, the science is settled. Run whenever you hear that, right? Or when you hear a scientist, like the head of the CDC director, she did an interview with Jake Tapper a month ago about schools reopening. This is actually February. And 3 times in the interview, she said, we need to do the work. And he's like, what are you talking about? And then at the end, she says, well, we need to pass the American Recovery Act. I kid you not. She said, we need to pass the American Recovery Act to give more money to our schools. Is that a scientific opinion or is that a political stance? Is that informing us, head of the CDC? Or is that trying to persuade us for a very political end? Interesting. I'd argue that there's so many COVID scientists out there that we hear from all the time that are not being honest. They're not being forthright. They're not being transparent. They're not informing. They're persuading. Check out this. This is a hotel in Chattanooga telling you have to wear masks. We don't care if you're not sick. We don't care if you've had it before. We don't care. Nothing matters. You just must wear it. Is that based on the science? Of course not. I'll give you 2 examples from Fauci on how he's persuaded as opposed to informed. The very first was this video back in March 2020 where he says, don't wear a mask. Here it is.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is.
Okay, now this is super important. Now when he's asked about that, he and others, they defend that. And they say, whoa, whoa, whoa. The reason he said that was because we were very early in the whole thing and we didn't have enough personal protection equipment for first responders. We didn't have enough masks for first responders. So we didn't want to create a huge rush of regular people going to the store and gobbling up all the masks. We wanted to save it for the hospitals. Okay. Why didn't you just say that back in March? Why didn't Fauci just say, yeah, masks are great, but we don't have a lot and we need to save it for people in the hospitals? Why didn't you say that? Because you weren't informing. You were persuading. I'd argue even manipulating. And now you want us to trust you on everything you're saying today? All right, I'll give you a break on that one. Here's another one about herd immunity, which we'll talk about again later. This is him admitting that he lied to us, or misled us at least. This is his quote. He said, so the question is like, what's herd immunity? And he would keep giving me different answers about what percentage of people need to get a vaccine or need to have had COVID in order to get herd immunity. He kept changing the number. He says, this is him, when polls said only about half of all Americans would take a vaccine, I was saying herd immunity would take 70 to 75%. Then when newer surveys said 60% or more would take the vaccine, I thought, oh, I can nudge this up a bit. So I went to 80 to 85%. Oh, I can nudge this up a bit? Are you informing us, Dr. Fauci? Or are you persuading us? Because if you're persuading us, I have no interest. Amazing. We have a ton of COVID things to talk about. We'll talk more about the collusion with the CDC coming up in just a little bit. But I'll end with this. Tucker Carlson interviewed Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, and I love this answer so much. This is actually someone with a Ron DeSantis, by the way, he was a JAG that was stationed with the Navy SEALs in Afghanistan, among other things, right? So he's brilliant. And he has a wonderful, curious, and critical mind. Tucker Carlson asked Ron DeSantis what the biggest mistake was that he made in his response to COVID.
Well, I think early on, I was just hungry for data. And so I was looking at South Korea, Italy, and I'm trying to make sense of this virus. It seemed to me that this was something that was risky for elderly people.
Yeah.
Didn't seem like there was much risk in people, not just kids, but even people who were in reasonably good health who were, say, under 50. But I didn't really have the proof of that in Florida. So when they did the 15 days to slow the spread and some of that stuff, we followed that. Whereas I think if I had more data, I would have had the ability to say, wait a minute, why would we need to, close a gym for 2 weeks? I mean, these are younger people going to work out. If you're healthy, you're going to end up dealing with the virus better. And so I think that it took me a few weeks, March and into April, to get enough data to say, okay, we're not doing Fauciism. We're going to make sure our state's open. We're going to get the kids back into school, and we'll just focus our protection on elderly people.
That's our next president, by the way. But I love that. His biggest mistake was even taking the first 2 weeks to slow the spread. Fantastic. All right, coming up next, we'll talk about COVID stuff in the third and fourth segment. Coming up next, though, I want to change gears a little bit here. CNN ran this absolute inflaming piece against cops for no reason whatsoever, and I want to debunk that in its entirety. Coming up next. True story. Mike Slater. Hey, Slater Crusaders, this video really annoys me. Someone sent this to me and said, Slater, see, this is proof of white privilege. This is proof that police discriminate against black people. And I watched the video and I said, what are you talking about? How can you see that in here? It's the CNN. Pulled over by police, 2 races, 2 very different experiences. So you got a black guy, young black guy, maybe like 25, and then another white woman. 2 friends, one white, one black, were pulled over for speeding on separate occasions. They compare their experiences with traffic stops in the Minneapolis suburbs. So obviously this is framed as the black man being treated terribly and the white woman being treated really well. Okay? So I got 3 clips I want to play this video here. And I want to know if you see this video as like, wow, police they're awful. They really treated this man horribly. Or if you're like me and you're like, how is this even a story? So here it is. Starts with dashboard camera footage of the police pulling over the black guy. Darius is his name.
Anytime I'm seeing a cop, my heart's dropping. This specific time I didn't see the cop when I passed her, but she pulled up behind me and pulled me over. And right away when she got out of the car, she took her gun out. You do kind of head into a fight or flight mode. Really, it's about how do you survive this. When she walked up, I threw my hands out. I said, hey, at this point, I've seen too many of young black women die through the cops' hands, so I'm thinking like, this can go any way at this moment.
Are you Darius? No. Okay. So you not got the warrant?
I have a warrant?
Yeah, you do. Why don't you unbuckle your seatbelt and step on out for me?
And they said, we're arresting you for a felony. So I get out of the car, they detain me. And it took some time for them to realize that they had the wrong Darius.
Shoot. This might be the wrong guy.
This picture pulls up and this dude's a lot darker than me. He has a tattoo on his neck. Yeah, he looks
literally not you.
I'm like, what? How do you? What? He doesn't look anything like me.
You are free to go. I am sorry.
That was the horrific experience? That was the racist treatment of a black man in a Minneapolis suburb? Seems like the police officer acted perfectly reasonably. He acted perfectly reasonably, and everything was fine. That's not an example of police misconduct. That's a case of perfect police and perfect citizen conduct. Everything there went perfectly. And as you saw at the end, the reason he was pulled over for speeding, but then they ran his plates or whatever, and someone falsely used his name. So there was a arrest warrant out for him, but it wasn't the person they were looking for, and they looked it up, and that's not the police officer's fault. How's the police supposed to know? At the end, he's like, well, how could they tell? How could they not know? He's way darker than me. You were speeding by. Like, how would they know? They got you, right? They brought you over, and they looked it up, and that was it. And the white woman shaking her head like, man, it's terrible. It's so awful. I'm so sorry this happened to you. And the cop figured it out. He was like, oh, geez, sorry. You're free to go. What am I missing here? What am I missing about this story? This is the terrible, horrible, evil police interaction? He made a Facebook Live about it.
Could have been dead today. Yeah. George Floyd came in my head. I ain't gonna lie. He came in my head. Man, anything can happen to us, man. Especially as black bodies, man. Black people, black men.
Black bodies. No, you could not have died today. Nothing. You would not have died today. You complied with orders. Nothing happened. George Floyd should not have come to your head other than to think maybe I will not. Were you high on fentanyl? The only reason George Floyd should have popped in your head is to think, I better not act like George Floyd. Better not resist arrest. Other than that, he should not have gone through your head. If anything else, and here's my point here, CNN should frame this instead as, hey everyone, be like Darius Strong. When you get pulled over by police, even if they falsely accuse you of something, like having a warrant out for your arrest, even though they thought they did, there was a warrant out for his arrest technically, but even if you don't think there should be a warrant out for your arrest, just comply. Be cool. Be like Darius. And it will all get sorted out. Right? What a bizarre thing that instead CNN spins it around. Well, we know why by now, but CNN spins it around as this huge racial thing. So then it turns over to the white woman, right? So she's like 25 years old or something. She feels so bad for her black friend.
There are
experience in his
different ways that I am seen and that you are seen in a vehicle in Minnesota, in the United States.
Have you ever been pulled over by the police, and what was that experience like for you?
Okay, I have been pulled over by the police. I was driving home from work really late at night. She was like, driver's license. I turned into the back seat and I was like, this is gonna be a minute. And grabbed my backpack and tore through everything. And then she was like, insurance. And I was starting to get really overwhelmed and I was tearing up, and she was like, I'll give you a couple minutes. And she walked back to the car, letting me just sit in my car. I reflected immediately after it happened for an officer to feel comfortable with my presence, to leave me in my vehicle, to let me have my breakdown, getting away with a warning.
It goes on. Here's why this officer treated you differently. Even though the officer treated Darius fine too, right? You were treated differently because you're a ditzy girl. It's not because of your race, it's because of your gender. You're not likely someone who's gonna go speed away. You're not likely someone who's gonna get out and pull a gun and shoot at cops, right? You're just being a bratty, spoiled girl. The way you were treated had nothing to do with your race. It's because you were a girl having a silly emotional breakdown. So, do you see how CNN used that and spun that to inflame racial tension? When it could have been presented in a way to de-escalate racial tension. It could have been used as a way to improve police black person tension, right? Hey everyone, here's an example of a potentially dangerous situation for that female police officer, right? This guy's a warrant out for his arrest, and everyone treats everyone kindly and perfectly and back and forth, and it goes great. They could have been lifted up in that way, but they couldn't help themselves at CNN. They had to make everything worse. That's what they do. I got a minute here. Let me make this quick point about police. You remember the 16-year-old who was shot and killed in Ohio by the police officer, Columbus, Ohio, and right, she was about to stab that other girl, and the police officer shot her and killed her. And the number one response, that and so many other examples, is, oh, why didn't you just taser her? Why didn't you just use your taser? As if the taser is just some magical fairy dust that you can just sprinkle upon a situation and everything gets better immediately. Jacob Blake, right, the guy who raped a woman and was stealing her car and kidnapping their children, who was ultimately shot 7 times in the back and became a Black Lives Matter hero as well. Police tased him twice. Twice. He just pulled the barbs out of his skin, kept going. We played this video the other day.
I got him. Keep the taser on.
Stop resisting!
He was tased. Didn't work. Recent study found that tasers only work 60% of the time. 258 times over the last 3 years, a taser failed to stop a suspect who was then shot and killed by police. And 106 of those times, the suspect became more violent after being electrocuted. So the taser, there's an argument, made the bad situation even worse. Police rated the newer models of taser less effective than the older ones because in 2009, the company reduced the power of the taser and also changed the angle of that the darts leave the taser, which means an officer has to be further away, even though most times that a taser is deployed, an officer is about 7 feet or closer to the suspect. And then it doesn't work as effectively because the barbs have to be, there's 2 that have to land inside the person, and they have to be further than a foot apart from each other. Otherwise, they don't work. So would you trust your life on 60% effectiveness? Someone's coming at you or lunging at another person, would you use something that works? 50-50 toss-up. So many people, just ignorant people out of their ignorance, talking about tasers as if that's like the solution to everything, right? But that's how progressives think. They have utopian, they don't understand there's no such thing as solutions, only trade-offs. They only deal with magic fairy dust solutions. And people think that police have this magic secret weapon to instantly freeze the situation and make sure everyone is safe and comply, right? A girl lunging at another girl with a knife after she just said, I'm going to stab the blank out of you, B. And we're just, oh, just taser. Everything will be fine. One last point I want to make about this. And this is an interesting point about science, too, and how science is very difficult because we can't even agree on terms. So LAPD, when they study taser effectiveness, they count each trigger pull as a taser usage. New York Police Department tracks each taser, not trigger pulls of a taser. So imagine a situation where an officer shocks a suspect with a taser 3 times. The first 2 fail to subdue him, but the 3rd one works. In Los Angeles, the effectiveness of the taser would be 33%. 3 trigger pulls, 1 was successful. In New York, the effectiveness would be 100%. 1 officer with a taser, 1 suspect subdued. So how well did the taser work? Was it 33% effective or was it 100% effective? Depends how you define it. Those are 2 very different things. And that's another reason why science can be very difficult and why the numbers can even be very difficult. So do what you want with all this stuff. I just bring it up as a nice example of this progressive desire to look for utopian solutions, which don't exist, and also a bit more empathy for police officers. A lot of ignorant people, oh, just use a taser. It's not a thing, really. People have no idea what it's like to be a police officer. And it's so easy for that ignorance to take over, right? Or, you know, you've seen this before, I'm sure. The NBA analyst Chris Palmer, during the initial Black Lives Matter riots last summer, he said, let it burn. And it was a low-income housing project that was burning. And then when the riots got a little closer to his home, he says, hey, where are all the police? We got to get the police here to put a stop to this. What's going on? The elites don't pay the price for their ideas. The elites don't have to walk around in dangerous situations with guns and tasers around their belt for their lives. They have no skin in the game, but they're the ones who control the narrative. Let's not get tricked by them anymore. Mark Hemingway from Real Clear Investigations coming up next. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, we're having some technical difficulties with our next guest, Mark Hemingway. Hopefully we get him on in just a second here, which may be okay either way because I went long on those first 2 segments, and we'll get some more time with the professor, Professor Vincent Racaniello, our virologist, coming up in a little bit, who is a scientist who informs and doesn't persuade, and I'm grateful to him for that. I want to talk about India with him coming up next. Like, why are cases in India exploding now? What's like a year later? Or have they always been high and now we're just paying attention because things are so much better here? And also in England, the government is running these experiments where they'll have 6,000 people go to a rave, but it's a government rave, right? Techno music blaring and everything, people jumping around, whatever. And then they test them and they track them for the next couple of weeks to see how much COVID spread. So we'll talk about that in a little bit and why they're doing that and what the results could be. I already know what they are because they've done this experiment in Spain. They had, I think it was also 6,000 people go to a rave in Barcelona, and they followed them afterwards. And 2 weeks later, only 6 people of the 6,000 had COVID. And the scientists concluded that all of them got COVID from a different event, not from the rave. So you'd think we can open everything up again, but alas, they'll never let us. At least here in California, maybe I have a different perspective because I'm here in California. Maybe if you're watching us from Texas, you're like, Slater, why do you keep going on about masks? Like, no one's wearing them here. Everyone's wearing them here. What'd you say, Matt? Sorry. Okay, cool. Everyone's still wearing them here in California, and kids are still terrified to go to school. And we still treat them like that they're going to get polio if they breathe in the wrong breath of air. Mark Hemingway is here from Real Clear Investigations. Mark, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good. I'm grateful you're here. I want to talk to you about the CDC and the collusion, it seems like, help me out if there's a better word, with the teachers union about keeping schools closed for longer. How do you interpret what this is?
Well, there's no other way to really look at this other than a very large special interest controlling policy for partisan reasons. I mean, for years, teachers unions have been one of the largest donors to the Democratic Party. I think there have been statistics in certain years where something like some obscene percentage, like 20 or 30% of the delegates at the Democratic Convention are members of a teachers union. There's really no question about the influence teachers unions have had on policy in the Democratic Party over the years. In 2004, when John Kerry ran for president, he publicly talked about, paying merit pay, which is to say paying teachers who have good classroom performance more money. Within a month, he backed off that proposal because the teachers union didn't want him to. Barack Obama, our first black president, one of the first big things he did when he took office in 2009 was he killed DC's school voucher program, which is a program designed primarily to benefit poor black kids, simply because the teachers unions wanted him to. And yet here is the first black president doing something that's just catastrophic for civil rights. There's no disputing they have that kind of power of the Democratic Party.
Wow. So why? What is their play? I think I have an idea, but I want to know what your take is on why the teachers union doesn't want kids to go back to school. Why are they using this leverage against their kids?
That's a really good question. I think part of it is that the unions place a lot of importance on seniority. Certainly there are older teachers and things like that who are afraid of COVID and should be because maybe they're in their 50s or 60s, that are, making their voices heard. But the other part of it is I think that it just simply, teaching a few hours a day from home dramatically decreases the workload for teachers. They don't have to go somewhere. They don't have to be somewhere. They don't have to be necessarily even accountable. And if their children have poor, terrible classroom performance, they can at least chalk it up to, virtual learning as opposed to having to be more accountable because they were in the classroom guiding them personally.
Really interesting. What do you make of the CDC folks and the Bureau? Well, let me just broad question about them first. What is the CDC? Everywhere I go and I ask people why they're still wearing masks and outside and stuff like that here in California, they always, the CDC says. How should we look at the CDC?
Well, the CDC is an agency, of unelected federal bureaucrats, which is not to say that they don't have some people at the CDC that, aren't experts or people that do know what they're talking about. But by and large, they are a political agency that acts at the discretion of the executive, which in this case is Joe Biden. And their guidance should be viewed as such. It's not to say that, maybe there aren't some doctors at the CDC that have some things worth listening to, but by and large, official statements from the CDC should be looked at through the prism of politics. And further, they're our federal agency. They do not have, de facto legislative power on their own. So if they issue quote unquote guidance, that may determine what a lot of institutions decide to do. But that just because the CDC says something doesn't mean you have to do it. This is not a law.
Why are people treating it like it's like I was in a grocery store the other day, didn't put a mask on, and the manager comes up, yells at me, and says, well, the CDC says. It's like, well, why do you care what the CDC, why are people so infatuated with them?
Well, the modern administrative state, aside from projecting this air of authority, it does have, certain authority in narrow areas in terms of issuing, mandates and other things like that businesses have to comply with, or institutions maybe have to comply with, because there is some, down the road fines or, legal backing to it. But by and large, just because they issue an edict about, oh, here's what we recommend that you should do, there's no legally binding thing about it. And further, you have the recourse of appealing to your local and federal elected officials and saying, no, we aren't going to do that. Certainly we've seen states that have done this, where they have decided to, some states have been a lot better about getting kids back in school than others. And, we've seen the proof at this point in time. Kids in private schools have been in class 5 days a week for months now. We know what the risks are for kids in COVID, and they just aren't great. They're not causing big breakouts in the community because kids don't seem to transmit COVID too much. In addition to, in the few times that kids do get COVID, they seem to burn through it very quickly.
One of these Biden advisors says that the coronavirus remains unpredictable. So we're not sure if we can keep school open up school even next fall. But as you said, it's not unpredictable. It's entirely predictable.
No, if you are young, as in college age or younger, we've seen a lot of evidence to know that the virus just doesn't spread it nearly as quickly, and it doesn't seem to do as much damage among, young people. It's just, but that's true of, a million illnesses, right? Young people just aren't hit as hard as older people. That's common sense. And common sense is certainly something that I think is lacking in these COVID debates. But what's worse, though, is you're not allowed to say that.
Mark, sorry we had a technical glitch earlier. I wish we could have talked longer, but we got to run. I appreciate your time, though. Mark Hemingway on Twitter. Please follow him. And he still has my favorite Twitter icon on all of Twitter. Heminator on the Twitter. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
By the way, it's a cartoon image of a man on fire with a no sign, like with a cross out. It's great. Professor Vincent Racaniello from Columbia coming up next. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, we just did a segment where we talked about Richard Feynman, the famous physicist, his Caltech address in 1974, commencement address, and he talked about how you need to be scientists to inform, not persuade. And I am grateful for our next professor, Vincent Racaniello, professor of virology at Columbia University. He is a wonderful teacher and informer. How are you, Professor?
I'm well, but I have to say I had withdrawal last week not being on your show.
Professor, we were all sitting here. Where's the professor at? What's going on? Well, I'm glad you're back, sir. Let's talk first about India. Mm-hmm. So I get why India is having a bad time, but I guess I don't understand why they're having a bad time now.
Yeah, that's a great question. A few months ago, people were asking me, why doesn't India have more COVID? And people were speculating all sorts of things, but I think they actually did, and they weren't testing very much, and so they didn't detect it. And it just got to a point where it's everywhere, and it exploded, and that's where we are now. So, there's nothing special about India in terms of why we didn't see it there 2 months ago. I think it was there, and now it's in much of the population. It's so crowded. Healthcare is very poor. There's not a lot of vaccination and treatment going on, and so that's where we are now, unfortunately. It's very sad.
Yeah, we knew it'd be bad because of all those things you just talked about. It's poor sanitation and obviously super, super dense.
Yeah.
But again, the hesitation. My theory was that our attention span just wasn't on India, right? So and now that things are kind of a little calmer here, we're now paying attention there more.
Yeah.
Similar to your point that it's always been kind of bad. So what do we do? Or what does India do? They're in a tough spot here.
Yeah, well, they don't have any vaccine or very little vaccine. They don't have monoclonal antibodies. I think the world needs to help them. They can't pull this out on their own, right? They don't have the infrastructure to do it. And they have to accept the help of other countries, which is possibly hard for them to do. But if they want to save people, we and others have to help them.
Yeah. Let's talk about England here. I saw this. We have B-roll of a rave going on. And Professor, maybe were you here? Were you at that concert?
Oh, I can't say, I can't admit it.
I think you may have been there. I don't want to get you in trouble, but it looks like I see you raving in the front row there. So listen, the government's putting these on. So there's a bunch of these, maybe like 10 of them, 10 different experiments. They have 6,000 people in some of these, and they test them before, and then they test them for a couple weeks after and see, if COVID spreads or whatever. What do you make of this experiment?
That's the kind of thing my older son likes to do, and he hasn't done it in a long time because he's wary. I think this is nuts because these people they're not wearing masks, right? And I'm sure most of them are not vaccinated. So a lot of them are going to get infected. We know when you put so many people together, a good number of them are infected. It's going to be transmitted. And they're of an age where they could get really sick. So this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Yet you can see that it's packed because people want to go.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
What can you do?
Well, it's interesting. The government's doing it. It's a government-sponsored event. They've done a bunch of them.
Yeah. Well, the UK government does a lot of crazy things, so I'm not surprised.
Don't they all? Let's talk about B117, speaking of England. So what do we need to know about B117, the variant?
So B117 has been in the news a long time. It was the first variant of concern, right, identified in the UK way back in December. And, they thought it was more virulent. They keep saying it's more transmissible. What we do know is it's not more virulent than the ancestral virus that has been circulating all of last year. As far as transmission goes, I don't think that's correct. So you mentioned earlier 60% more transmissible. I think that number is wrong. I don't think anyone has the data to say it's more transmissible. What we do know is this virus is more fit probably than its ancestor. What does that mean?
More
it
fit, you said?
It reproduces better. It does better in humans than the previous virus. And so whenever B117 goes somewhere else, it may displace the other virus that's been circulating there. It doesn't always do it, but I'm not too worried about it. I think it's handled by the vaccine. Okay, that's the bottom line. So get vaccinated and you'll be able to deal with B117.
And I got it from, it's the New York Times line. B117, the first variant to come to widespread attention, is about 60% more contagious and 67% more deadly than the original.
Oh, that's all wrong. The New York Times is wrong. I'm sorry. I just wrote a letter to one of the writers at the time saying, please stop transmitting stuff that's not right. This idea that it's more transmissible is not right. There are no data to support it. Virulent, for sure it's not more virulent. That study has been published in The Lancet 2 weeks ago. So I just don't understand. They're talking to the wrong people, and that the people they're talking to don't get it right.
What about the more deadly part? 67% more deadly.
Wrong. Study came out in The Lancet 2 weeks ago showing it's not more deadly. It's the same as the ancestral virus. They should be talking to me, but I'm talking to you, Mike, so this is where the information comes from.
We'll get the word to them, Professor, I promise you. Well, that's frustrating, Professor, because we're still a year later, and this is how science works, right? It's tricky.
Yes.
We got to go back and forth. But what do you do with that? I mean, you know what you're talking about. And you said, I don't know what I'm talking about when I read that, and I take my word for it. So how is a human to do this?
Well, it's hard because they supposedly speak to experts, right, who say it's more transmissible and it's more virulent. But I can give you, not just me, but many other virologists who would say the opposite. So they're just not speaking to the right people. So what do you do? That's your question. In time, it'll all sort out, right? So that's the way science works. The experiments get done, we get the data, but by then the pandemic's over and nobody cares. And so this is a real problem. And, you know, it's why I do the podcast, but we can't reach everyone, obviously.
Well, that goes back to the Richard Feynman quote about informing and putting, saying here's what we know and here's what we don't know and here's what could undermine what I presented. And but we don't have a lot of that.
But Mike, you know, we're in a situation where scientists love to talk to reporters. They love seeing their name in print. And with the pandemic, it makes it even more intense, right? So I think a lot of them are out there and talking, and they're not quite sure about what they're talking about.
Professor Vincent Racaniello, our informer, microbe.tv, that's the podcast. Go check it out there, and that's who I trust. Professor, always good to talk to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Have a great day. Microbe.tv for more of the professor. Good stuff. Do it again tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word.